Hey everybody, so I think it's time for a little acting lesson in why I think that the Republican Party and the people that are kind of running the show could use a little acting lesson. We've all seen the performances of Erica Cook. So in ancient Greece, they used to focus on story structure. The experience of the playwright was very front and center. And they would come out and the playwright would be the one at the beginning, would be the only one, and they would just tell the story. They would set the story up, and then they would play the roles, and they would tell the story from their perspective. And then gradually they added on other actors and chorus and etc. But the focus was always the story. Now later they would add certain things like here, the dramatic, visual, and auditory elements of performance encompassing everything from the use of masks and elaborate scenery to special effects like Deus Machina, which is when they would use a crane and they would bring the godlike figures into the arena, usually at the end of the play, to resolve the situation, magically resolve the situation. Of course, the women were not allowed to play characters, so the men were... who were men and boys were masks made of linen and attached with hair to portray different characters and emotions. This was evident also in Shakespearean times, and this was forbidden for women to be a part of this experience. Now, which is interesting, because later when we get into the Roman times, we had a lot more, they did a lot of performance. There was a lot of spectacle. There were fireworks and a lot of things to kind of elevate the senses. This was not necessarily intellectual theater. However, there were playwrights like Seneca that were dominating and would create and tell stories that were kind of woven into the fabric of the social construct. However, most of the performances and most of the spectacle, like the gladiators and these combats and these flooding the arenas with water, it was all just spectacle, and it was void of substance. Like a lot of the stories were void of substance during the Roman period. Spectacles, both theatrical and more brutal ones like gladiator combat, fostered a sense of shared experience, belonging among citizens. So these spectacles were... So these spectacles were used as a form of entertainment and tool for social and political cohesion. They featured elaborate sets, stage machinery, music, and acting, and were used to reinforce Roman identity, celebrate achievements, and serve as a form of imperial generosity. In other words, it was basically just an excuse to distract the people from actually uprising. So they would bring them all together, and then they would just distract them with all of these different spectacles, whether it be the WMMA or the World Wrestling Association or whatever. The gladiator stuff. They would also use the political propaganda. Political leaders use spectacle to influence public opinion. Ding, ding, ding. Demonstrate their popularity and consolidate their power. Ding, 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 ding. Entertainment. Spectacles provided a major source of entertainment for the Roman populace, which they sought through various events, including plays, chariot races, and animal. So this kind of spectacle is meant to distract citizenry from the actual issue of the Roman elite starving them, so it'd keep them from rising up against the elite. That's what's happening, right? And then they would do these elaborate things like mechanics such as trapdoors, hydraulic systems were used to create dynamic scene changes and other visual effects. They would even, like I said, they would even flood the arena to do, to do battleship stories and stuff like that. So then we move on to the Shakespeare time. Shakespeare was a time where they really went back to story structure, and they really focused on the story, the narrative. Character was very important, less about the drama, the spectacle, and more about the story structure. Skills that were required for actors were expected to be versatile, performing skills, fencing, singing, playing instruments, and executing energetic dances. Critics praised naturalness in performance, while those who tore up passion and totters, they were mocked. So while these performers who were considered over dramatic or acting I actually think this is a really good time to remind you that acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but I wanted to start off with that at the beginning. Acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. This is an elaboration of what Meisner said. Meisner said that acting is behaving truthfully in imaginary circumstances, and we later kind of elevated that to mean living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. We'll get to that. The use of iambic pentameter for Shakespeare in that time was to help and use it as a tool for actors to providing consistent framework for memorization performances that could be convey emotion or share shifts in tone, or emotion or shifts in tone. So iambic pentameter helped with the emotional context. So that's why it's important to know all the lines and move with the lines, because it's going to help illustrate the emotional context of the scene and the play and the character. Now, I use illustration poignantly there because when we are illustrative, we are acting, we are overacting. Even in Shakespeare's time, it wasn't to what degree realism took a part of our experience in the world of acting when it got up to Stanislavski at the turn of the century, and then moving over into the world of theater in New York around the 1940s, 1930s. So Stanislavski was the one that introduced the system. So basically what happened was he met Anton Chekhov. He ended up doing The Seagull, which is where he brought on the players to make Seagull a very, very popular, warmly welcomed play by using realism. Using the system, which emphasizes psychological realism by using a series of techniques to help actors create authentic and believable characters. The onset of this was the person who really took on, and Marlon Brando studied with Stella Adler, that is the truth, and he was the one that shifted the entire, really put to play the Stanislavski system that kind of evolved through Stella Adler, Uta Hagen, even Meisner, and a lot of these really great acting teachers of the time, where they used realism from acting from within and out. We also had the Michael Chekhovs who came in and experienced the Chekhovian practice, which we'll talk about later. Anyway, the important part about this is that Marlon Brando was the turning point in which acting was representative of real, truthful living under imaginary circumstances. Now, we also have Vivien Leigh, who actually won an Oscar, I think, for this role. Vivien Leigh was very... and it actually worked for this role. She was a little overdramatic. She didn't really get the message. She actually won, but this was the beginning, the turn in which acting became very, very real for film. We had a lot of theater actors that came in and started working with realism, the Stanislavski method, Strasberg, the method, a system that encouraged the actor to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. All right, I'm getting to the point. The point is, this is spectacle. This is meant to distract us. This is acting. This is illustrative. This is not real. This is fabricated. This is Tammy Faye Baker doing the same thing. Tammy Faye Baker. Vivien Leigh. And when I say spectacle, is the distraction. It is the gluttonous need for glitz and glamour. That's what's exposed at this little celebration on how Shakespeare audiences were more intelligent. Greek audiences were more intelligent. Roman audiences wanted to be distracted. In the famous lines of Vivien Leigh, I don't want truth. I want magic. I want what ought to be the truth. And that, my friends, is how to tell a lie. A lie is illustrative. A lie is fabricated. So any of you Republican people out there, leaders who need acting lessons, which a lot of you do, it is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. I'll give DT some credit. That dude believes his BS so much, it makes it kind of believable sometimes, but not anymore. So, my friends, it is time to take off the masks. Take off the masks. And let's live in some truth for once. You've been lied to. It's spectacle. It's meant to distract you while they grape you. And just one more reminder. This was the Roman audience. Spectacle.